We're talking about compounding effects. One Mustang or two Mustangs that you take out of the system is a Mustang that a sanctuary doesn't have to worry about. It's a Mustang that doesn't get traded around, especially if you're committing to this financially and you are a person that has backup plans if something happens to you. I know that Melissa can back me up on this. The number of horses from the Anarchy auction, the one that our guys came from, that have ended up being rehomed because somebody got in over their head, or somebody didn't have the financial bid, or somebody didn't have the backup because they wanted to save them, is immense. And I know she'll have seen this as well as I. The people that tend to take on as many horses as they can to, quote, try and save them all, a lot of those horses end up later having to get taken to sanctuaries or find homes, or end up being euthanized because they're too thin, or they're now dangerous because the person took on too many. And so really doing your research and making a careful selection and taking one or two horses has a compounding effect, and you prevent a whole bunch of other bad scenarios from happening that people have to react to by being proactive.
There are healers on this planet with the power to soften the suffering of mankind, yet they have remained in the recesses of the world, abused, discarded, and labeled as trash. This is The Touch of a Mustang. I am your host, Shalyce Cluff, and I'm here to tell the story of wild horses, Mustangs, and the humans who are discovering and sharing their gifts while working to protect their well-being and preserve their spirit so this divine power won't be lost. Join us on this quest with the Wild Mustang.
Thank you guys all for being here today. We're going to have a great conversation about Mustangs, adopting Mustangs, all things Mustangs today. So this is a little bit different. We're going to do kind of a little panel discussion. And so to start with, I thought we could all introduce ourselves. I'm Shalyce. I'm the host, so everybody who's watched this before knows me. And then maybe we'll just go Melissa, Sam, and Hollie. Introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself and your experience with Mustangs.
Sure. I'm Melissa, and I am the Mustang mom to Stargazer and Nora, and they are pair of wild Mustangs out of the Anarchy herd, and they are just the love of my life.
All right. I'm Samantha Couper, and I do equine behavior consulting, specifically taking different information I've gathered from basically being out in the wild with horses on our public range lands, and bringing that back to the general public so that they can learn how to best change their facilities and their engagement with their horses to better meet their basic needs. I have two adopted Mustangs that are from the same herd as Stargazer and Nora.
Fun.
Cool. And then I'm Hollie, and I live in Oregon. I actually don't have experience really with Mustangs. I know a few through our sanctuary. I do work with horses and kids and adults with disabilities, and I have an off-track thoroughbred and a cute little halflinger, and I love all things horses. I grew up with horses. My cousin is actually Pat Pirelli, and my grandma got me started with horses when I was young, and then as I grew and went to college and started a family, I kind of fell out of it for a season. And then in 2020, when my kids had nothing to do, we got back into horses, and I ended up leaving my 10-year job in the modeling industry to become a ranch attendant and scoop poop. And I literally was like, all I want to do is scoop poop, just let me scoop poop.
Yeah.
And that is just continued to snowball from one thing to the next. And now I'm turning 40 this year and running a marathon in Wyoming, the Run with the Horses, which sparked all these ideas that just, again, keep snowballing. It's totally just a work of God that he's just kind of putting all these little pieces together. And here I am now on a podcast.
That's right. Converting you to the Mustangs and everybody else who's listening, hopefully.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's really cool to have you guys all here. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to just talk about Mustangs with, 4 people who just love them and know how incredible they are. So we're going to kind of hand it over to Hollie. And what we're going to do here is really just talk about some of the things people may not know about Mustangs, things that might help people if you do have a Mustang or if you're thinking about getting a Mustang, and just sharing all the knowledge and experiences and information that we have about successfully having Mustangs in your life in whatever form you might choose to have them. So, Hollie, I will send it your way to take it away.
you know, a lot of people like myself don't have a lot of experience with Mustangs. I find even just in my family, really people are very uneducated on the Mustangs. So just in a few words or a few sentences, could you kind of paint a picture of the Mustang for the general listener?
Yeah, so I want to highlight two major things about Mustangs. So they're extremely varied. So there's not really a way to compile all Mustangs into one from that kind of standpoint, but they do differ a lot from domestic horses in two key points. One, most Mustangs have had their introduction to other horses out in a wild setting where it's not highly controlled. So they've had a lot of development of social skills that many domestic horses don't get, who may have a much more limited pool of horses they can interact with. And two, for most Mustangs, the first time you meet them, the first time you get your Mustang, is going to be the first major interaction those horses have with domestic lifestyle and human beings, as most domestic horses have already had some amount of handling. Where Mustangs, they're going to have unique kind of mindsets and experiences you may not find in a domestic horse because of that difference in upbringing.
Well, so for me, Mustangs are just very different than domestic horses. Just the experience that I'm having with them is so different. I've had domestic horses my entire life, and so Stargazer and Nora were the first Mustangs that I have ever adopted or worked with. And I would just say that they are just so curious and cool, and it's really neat to have seen and known them in the wild and to have photographed them in the wild and just to watch their behavior and their interactions out there and see how that looks like in a domestic setting. So for me, that's like what a wild Mustang is.
I love it. That's great. And Melissa, that kind of goes into one of my questions I had for you as to like, so you knew them in the wild and then now you've adopted them and put them back together, which is so amazing. And I love their story. What observations or like behavioral changes have you seen from that transition?
Sure. So, I mean, I was introduced to wild Mustangs as a photographer. So the first time I ever saw wild horses was actually out at Onaki. And so I went out there on a photography workshop, and to say it was life-changing is just an understatement because it truly, really was. But I remember watching, and actually you could hear like the horses coming. You could see the cloud of dust coming before you could even see horses, but they came all into water, and it was just the most magical, incredible moment to just witness these horses with how they communicated and how they interacted in their family bands. But, when they first came to water, at the very end of the group was these three horses that I was really excited to see. One was his name was Old Man, and he was like the legend of the Anaki horses. He was, well over 20 some years old. Who knows exactly how old he was. But then there was this handsome Pinto with him that was younger and cooler, and it was Stargazer. And honestly, he was one of the first horses I ever photographed, and I just fell in love with him from the very start. And so I started learning about Mustangs through this photography workshop, and just learning about, I didn't even know there were wild horses. I didn't know that they were in conflict and they were being rounded up. And so I just fell in love. And I would say that when the first roundup happened, which was in 2000, that I was aware of, was in 2019, and that's how Sam and I ended up connecting, because we didn't know. There were some horses that were rounded up that we didn't expect to be rounded up, and so we got more and more involved in the Anaki horses. And for me particularly, I started learning more about them, learning what the issues were. And so as time progressed, I became more involved. But then the 2021 roundup occurred, and Stargazer and Nora were an item at that point. And it was really cool to kind of see Stargazer come across and find his first mare. So this was the first mare that he had in the wild. He was a bit of an older bachelor stallion, and he was really well photographed, well known, just because he was easy to spot. He has a brother out there that was pretty cool looking as well, and so they were the Pinto brothers. But I know I'm just like rambling on about them. I literally could talk about these guys forever. But when the roundup occurred, I just really wanted to make sure that Stargazer and Nora stayed together. And so I tried to honestly get them to a sanctuary first. And, that didn't work out. And so I adopted them both together. And these are the first wild horses I ever had. So
Awesome. So, and then I guess we could kind of segue into a question for Sam. What could we really learn about herd behavior that might set us up for better transitions or just treatment for even people that are working in some realm of the Mustang world to help them transition from wild to adopted?
I mean, the list there is immensely long. I think one of the big things that we can take away, even if we can't observe wild horse behavior, is one of the huge social strategies for horses. I think, as we all know intrinsically, they are a herd animal. And something that could be taken advantage of a lot more is that concept of, I don't know if you're familiar with it, I'll explain it, but social facilitation. Where basically, if you've got one animal that's doing a behavior, that the other animals near it are more likely to try that behavior as well. So it's not quite like watching learning, because we're not actually sure from a scientific standpoint if horses actually learn by observation in the same way we think of human beings learn by observation. But they definitely learn through that social facilitation process, where like if a horse goes to try a food item, then another horse might go try and food that item as well, right? And so we can use that when we're working with these young fearful horses. Maybe we already have a domestic horse who loves scratches, right? And we can put in our Mustang with that domestic horse so that there's more and more scenarios set up for that horse where they're seeing another horse that's doing something. It also helps them be calmer, and it ends up with a positive experience for them. Plus, that also helps with horses to have another horse around. Of course, they are herd animals, and so ensuring that as much as we can, we have horses in with other horses, as long as that's positive for them, it's not an aggressive interaction. It really can go a huge long way to breach that divide between being removed from their herds in the wild and then ending up in a domestic setting where they have much less choices who they hang out with.
Yeah, that's great. Makes sense too. I actually had a horse at work recently that's a domestic horse, but she's paired with another horse that they get along well. But I realized the other day that they don't groom each other. And she recently has become obsessed with me scratching her nose and her mouth. And she'll literally be in a lesson and then spot me and like try to walk over to me like, you should scratch my nose. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's because she's not grooming ever. So she's like lacking that interaction with her herd mate. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think it's really important to realize that the more we can put horses in an environment that is suited to them and how they would live versus how we as humans live or think that they should live, that it makes a huge difference. I was just talking with someone who works with off the track thoroughbreds, and she was saying, these horses are just stalled all the time where they're racing and then they come in domestic life. And so one of their requirements is like the horses need to have room to run. And because it is such a difference taking a thoroughbred out of a stall that's in a stall all the time, how they're going to behave versus taking one out of a pasture. So there are just so many different intricacies that's like they can fulfill a lot of their needs if we set them up for an environment that's meant for horses, rather than thinking like they're a horse, they need everything I need, because it is very different. Like we live in two different worlds, even though, sometimes we like to say like we're part of their herd, like we're really not. It's a whole different dynamics and things that they have needs of that we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can relate to that with my thoroughbred. When I first got him, I really had a lot of ideas in my mind of like, okay, we're going to groom and we're going to lunge and we're going to do all these things. And now, like, we work at such a level of just trying to make sure that he knows that I'm not there for any harm for him, that he can trust me, that I can trust him. And sometimes we don't make it through grooming because he doesn't really like it that much. But we've been practicing without a halter on so that he has a choice to engage with me. And now we'll end up having like 20-minute sessions where he just stands there and lets me, brush his legs out and brush him a little bit. And once he's done, he's like, okay, that's enough and that's good. But there is such that level of just our human way. You were like, you're so dirty, I need to get the mud off of you. But he doesn't care,
Yeah.
He enjoys it and he'd rather have the mud. And if I do manage to get it all off, he's putting it right back on.
Yeah, that's really true. Do you have any other things to add to that, Sam? Like specific things where people can just maybe consider their setup and just the life their horse is basically going to live that would maybe help it to make it easier when they do have human interactions, because we're with them a relatively minimal amount of time compared to how much time they're just living life on their own.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the list is miles and miles long. There's so much we can do, and unfortunately, it's hard to give very specific answers to that would apply to everybody, because it depends so intensely on what is the funding available to you, what is the setup available to you.
Yeah.
The big three takeaways that are very commonly recommended by different behavior professionals, people that do behavior consulting, that's kind of their bread and butter, is, of course, hopefully you've heard of it, and if not, then this is great, you'll hear it now, but the three F's: friends, forage, freedom. We've kind of already talked a little bit about the friends bit with social facilitation, but forage, making sure they have something to chew on all the time, right? So some horses can't do necessarily 24/7 hay in the same way, but you can look at things like straw and other forage items to really make sure they've got something in their gut at all times, because horses are spend almost every hour of their waking eating in wild settings. And so that can really help reduce spookiness and give them something to occupy the time rather than eating your wood or, whatever else you've got going on. And then space to move. A lot of times Mustangs are brought into really small pens, which is fine for working with them. But if you're thinking about getting a Mustang and you don't have a setup yet, really consider, how can I give my horse more space to move when I'm not working with it, and set it up so I can move them around as low stress as possible while they're still unhandled to the actual training area. And how that looks is going to differ from person to person. But, as much as we can, giving access to those things, even while they're still in that training period, is really important and will help the training go much faster.
Yeah. That's a great point. I think everyone can't have just an ideal, optimized, perfect setup, but there are probably always some little changes you can make, like, make the round pen a little closer so it's a really easy transition if you're moving them from where they're the corral to the round pen, or different things like that. So yeah, I really like that.
Okay, so I would say, for me, when I decided to jump into this, I obviously like researching and really diving into things, and I felt really overwhelmed really fast. So with so many wild horses in holding facilities, I feel like some people might learn about this issue and be like, whoa, thousands and thousands of horses, what could I do? So really, how can one successful adoption truly make a difference to someone that may not be as, horse obsessed as like I am? Like, I understand it, I get it, I want to take all of them, but how can that really make a difference in this giant issue?
Yeah. I mean, the wild horse and burro issue is really overwhelming, and there's no easy answer, and it's so layered, and we could have an entire 5 podcasts dedicated to the wild horse and burro issue. But I would say, at least for me, those two horses, in my case, Stargazer and Nora, like I have to focus on them and know that I gave them the best life that I possibly could, that they're never going to be in the slaughter pipeline. They are going to have a forever home, and I will do everything I can to help them. And sometimes it feels like there's thousands and thousands of horses, am I really making a difference? And I think for me, I am, because Stargazer and Nora I want them to be ambassadors for that, you can do this. Like, I was terrified to adopt Mustangs. I've had horses my entire life, but I did my research. I put a great network around me. I was committed to them. I financially committed to them as well. And I think that's not something that we talk about a lot, that sure, things get tough, but like, I've financially committed as well, that I'm going to do the best I can for them. And so at the end of the day, they are ambassadors for other people being able to adopt wild horses with knowledge and resources, and quite frankly, friends. And for me, they've changed my life. I know that I'm helping them, but they've helped me so much more. I can never repay them for what they've done for me. So it is a big issue, but I see them and I know that I am making a difference.
I love that.
Yeah, and I think when you think that there's stories like Melissa's all over the country, it is one Mustang. It's not enough for all the Mustangs in holding, but I do think it's having a ripple effect. And I think you're a good example of that, Holly, where it's like you have just recently kind of discovered Mustangs and become intrigued by them. And I also agree, like Melissa said, if we can get one adopter that provides a committed home, like, that is one of the absolute most powerful things that can be done for a Mustang. No, it doesn't save them all, but every home that will commit to the Mustang they adopt will make a huge difference overall.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, for me, I worked in wild horse advocacy and really got to know the issue inside and out, and, visited multiple ranges and saw lots of wild horses out on the range, went to roundups, went to holding facilities, we attended in-person adoptions, had online auctions, in-person auctions, the whole gamut of the entire wild horse and burro issue. went to training facilities. Like, it's really, I felt like I walked into getting as much information as I could firsthand and trying to take that and to apply to what I'm doing with them today. And I feel like that really helps me be a much more educated and well-rounded, person. Like I understand where they're coming from, I think, from knowing their backstory and their history and what they're up against.
And I think that's really amazing that you were able to go and get that firsthand knowledge. And that's kind of what I'm seeking from a lot of people is firsthand experience, because it's so emotionally charged, and social media gives us, one outlet of something that's emotionally charged and then another one that's polar opposite. And you feel so torn, like, wait a minute, where am I supposed to feel here? What am I supposed, and ultimately, like, for me and a lot of the people that I'm meeting through this process, we do care about the horse. Like, that's the most important thing, is the horse, right? And the issues, like you said, are so layered and so complex. So to meet different people through this process that have firsthand experience is really, really valuable. I appreciate it a lot, hearing from you.
Yeah, and I know I'm learning every day about it. Like, there's always something new to learn. There's different perspectives. There's ways to approach things differently. I mean, I didn't know anything about R positive before, quite frankly, until I met Sam. And so, so she was super helpful in guiding me in that direction and putting really strong trainers and horse gentlers around me that knew more than I did and saw more than I did and wanted to listen. And so for me, it's a journey, and I'm still on this journey, and I don't think I have all the answers, and I don't think I'll ever have all the answers, but I like to think that I keep seeking out as much information as possible with the goal of making sure that Stargazer and Nora have the best chance of success. And for me, I think I'm seeing that.
Yeah. That's huge, just that openness to continue learning. And I think the community is leaning more towards that. And it's really cool to see there's a lot of people who, are willing to learn, want what's best for the horses in whatever realm they're working in, whether that, that can go from sanctuary to like veteran programs to private ownership, but that people are really opening themselves to kind of listening to the Mustang and learning from them and learning from others who have worked with them is pretty huge and cool. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Sam, about the difference it makes one Mustang?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have all touched on it, and just, I guess, boil it into a summary. We're talking about compounding effects. One Mustang or two Mustangs that you take out of the system is a Mustang that a sanctuary doesn't have to worry about. It's a Mustang that doesn't get traded around, especially if you're committing to this financially and you are a person that has backup plans if something happens to you. I know that Melissa can back me up on this. The number of horses from the Aniki auction, the one that our guys came from, that have ended up being rehomed because somebody got in over their head, or somebody didn't have the financial bid, or somebody didn't have the backup because they wanted to save them, is immense. And I know she'll have seen this as well as I. The people that tend to take on as many horses as they can to, quote, try and save them all, a lot of those horses end up later having to get taken to sanctuaries or find homes, or end up being euthanized because they're too thin, or they're now dangerous because the person took on too many. And so really doing your research and making a careful selection and taking one or two horses has a compounding effect, and you prevent a whole bunch of other bad scenarios from happening that people have to react to by being proactive.
I 100% agree. And I think there's a lot of well-intentioned people that want to take and save as many wild horses as possible, but I don't think they think through like how expensive it is to feed them all through winter. This has been a long winter. Vet care, it's a lot. And so I think people they're well intended, but it just doesn't always pan out that way. For me, like, having my two, I mean, Stargazer is not a horse that I can ride. I'll never be able to ride him. He's been injured. I found things that he likes to do, and that's tricks. And he paints now, so he's a painter.
Yeah, so cute.
But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that's what we're doing, and we're still learning and we're still growing. But that's what his life looks like. Nora, on the other hand, I mean, she would die if I didn't do something with her. She's so highly motivated and wants to learn and eager to please, and we're learning to jump, and she's just so fun and cool and to do stuff with. But their plan is very different, so I had to take my vision of what I wanted to have happen. And I had to say, what do you want to have happen? And what is best for you? And really adjust to that. And I think Sam can, Sam listens like I do too. Like, don't you think, Sam?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you get a horse and you have a specific plan in mind, they will throw a wrench in it and you'll end up doing something else. If you're paying attention, some people will try and power through it and it probably won't end well for them, or they're always going to be struggling with their horses. But yeah, I mean, they're living, breathing creatures that have their own thoughts and opinions, their own experiences, some of which we didn't get to see or experience. And so I think having a Mustang is about setting aside our preconceptions about what they're going to be bought for and go, okay, I am taking on the care of this horse. What does this horse want out of this relationship?
Yeah, I think that commitment is so central because they are so easy to get into. $125, you can bring a wild horse home, $125 and $1,000 in return sometimes. So they are so accessible. And then you see things where it looks like they're also really easy to train, and that may or may not be true. And I think we kind of touched on this when we were just discussing what we would want to bring up, but I think it's really important that you are able to set aside your vision of what this is going to be like and instead embrace what it is and be committed to it, I think is the other really key thing. Don't just go in thinking it's going to be some easy project, because most likely, my experience, it won't be easy, but it'll be so worthwhile and so extraordinary. And you will learn and gain so much from it in your personal life. And so, yeah, if you can have that commitment and kind of set aside those preconceived notions, the timeline is something we talked about. It might be 2 days that you touch them. It might be 3 months until you touch them, or until you put a saddle on, or whatever you might want to do with them. And, be okay with that and kind of enjoy that journey, because it's a pretty cool journey to consider that you're like partnering with a wild horse and kind of joining your lives together.
Yeah. I mean, whenever I adopted Stargazer and Nora, I worked with Sam Van Fleet in the first couple months to help gentle them. And she's just so much more experienced and has done this so many times. And she does compete in some of the makeovers. But what I like about her is that she listens to the horse, and if it doesn't make sense, she doesn't do it. And she's pulled out of those processes because it didn't make sense for that horse. But she helped me in the very beginning, and then I went and learned from her too. And so I think that was really, really helpful. And just how much, at least for me in the beginning, I thought that I was listening and I really wasn't listening, and how much I talked when I didn't. I used 10 cues when I just needed one. And so it was really a kind of a rewarding experience. But when I brought them home to my house for the first time, I mean, I called Sam, not Sam Van Fleet, but Sam on the call, and crying and saying, I cannot do this. This is so scary. I'm so overwhelmed. And I could do it. And she's like, you can do this. I know you've got this. Like, so what? You go slower. That's okay. And that was all the encouragement that I personally needed, was just someone to go, hey, I believe in you. You can do it. You have you do your research, you have a network, you're committed. You're not going to be riding this horse as fast as you think, like, what it shows online or what Instagram shows you that you can do.
Yeah.
And here I am, 2 years later, or 3 years later, I guess. And I'm having the time of my life with my little mare. She's so fun. And, actually this painting on the back here, this blue one, that was Stargazer's first painting he ever did. So like, we're just accomplishing so much. And the timeline just I need to take myself out of it and let's just listen, quite frankly. So I'm so grateful to all the things in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that support is huge. Yeah, just having someone there to be like, it's okay, you're doing okay, and just keep going. That's huge.
Yeah. And we were just talking about this, I think, on Instagram, I was just talking about this with a friend of mine that has a thoroughbred, about just barn culture and how it can feel so overwhelming to be in a barn setting. And when I moved my horses to a friend's that so graciously let me start boarding my horses there, and I didn't have that pressure from all of the different people who thought this is what you should be doing with your horse, our relationship changed drastically. But that's really sad, because I look at like us talking today, what wonderful, knowledge that you're sharing with me. And if we could build such a better support system for people, like how incredible could that be for all of these horses, Mustang or not, to just be able to know that like we have Sam, we have Melissa, we have Shalyce, we have all these people we can connect with to give us guidance and support on whatever our journey looks like. So as this like marathon training and process has started to unfold, like that's kind of what I'm hoping will happen for other people too, is because I'm connecting with so many people. And one of the people that connected me with Shalyce is a friend of mine named Matson, and he runs At Ease Horsemanship, and they are working with veterans and service members and using Mustangs to work through that process. And we actually met when we were being certified to teach through CHA riders with disabilities. And then 2 years later, we are now connected through Mustangs, which is, I mean, we came from very different worlds, and I never thought this is where we would be. And now we're connected through Mustangs and trying to support one another. And I just think there's so much that we could offer one another if we could just set aside that, this is what it should look like,
Mm-hmm. And for me, I have a domestic horse. Ruben is his name. And Sam has helped me out so much with him because how he interacts with the Mustangs is so very different than how the Mustangs interact with each other or with him. It's literally like two languages they're trying to communicate. So something as simple as like having two Mustangs and a domestic horse, putting them all together, and what does that look like? Just trying to understand both viewpoints has been really helpful. I know Sam has literally, I've sent her videos. I'm like, what is happening here? Please interpret this, because I don't know. Is he weird? What is going on with my domestic horse? So,
is that what we do? We just send Sam videos and say what's going on? What is it? Do you do that with teenagers too? I'll send you videos of my teenagers and see what's
okay. I'm not qualified to talk about human children, just horses.
That's awesome. I love that. So what do you think? Let's see. What if someone's, great-great-grandma wants to participate in supporting Mustangs? She hears a podcast, she sees something on Instagram, and she's all in, but she's definitely not in any position to adopt a Mustang at this stage in her life. So how can she support?
As with all of these questions, depends on what you've got available to you. I mean, one of the classic answers, of course, is financial support is great. If you've got somebody in your family that you know that wants to get involved with Mustangs, help support them financially there. If you know of some people that you trust that have sanctuaries that they really like, that they've gone and visited, do your homework, make sure you're supporting what you want to support. But yeah, financial stuff is great, always. But one of the things people don't always think about that can be a possibility is if, you're an older person, but you have acreage, you can possibly open up that acreage to someone who wants to start working with Mustangs. Now, of course, cover your bases legally, we really want to take care with the process, but that's an excellent way that, you could have the other person care for it and the other person puts all the money into it. You've just offered your property as a way for somebody who maybe doesn't have the ability to buy their own property right now to get started. So those are two big ones that I can think of. Melissa, you have some others?
Hay. Always hay. You can buy hay bale.
For anybody who has a Mustang, they will take it.
Yep, I will take a hay bale. You can come to my house with a hay bale, and I would love you.
As many as you want. We will welcome them.
No, but I mean, joking aside, just really support. I mean, I can't tell you how much, at least in my little circle of friends, that just listening and just telling me I can do it, and just knowing that, and just celebrating my wins, and listening to my uncertainties has been really, really helpful. So, I mean, emotional support is big too. Yeah. And I love when people love to listen to me talk about these horses. So, grandmas love to chat on the phone. So that's always helpful too.
Yeah, I think those are great. I love that. Hey, I thought you were saying hey, like you were starting a conversation.
No, hey, I definitely
actual hay. That's what we're looking for. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
We'll take all the hay. Yeah. Actually, horses are very similar to teenagers. They never stop eating.
Yeah.
Bad.
Very accurate. How about, we didn't really touch too much on this, but any experience you've had with the adoption process? I know, obviously, Melissa, you've jumped into that, but just whatever you want to share, you're comfortable sharing with the adoption process or auction or, in person, online.
I don't know, Sam, if you want to go first, or pretty brutal.
Sure.
It's a little wild.
That's a tough one. I have a personal opinion here, and honestly, I don't think this applies to everyone. So anyone listening, take this with salt. This doesn't mean you have to do it this way. But I personally much prefer going in person. It's cheaper. You don't have to rely on your internet crashing, and you get to actually look at the horse and connect with it. Now, that's not feasible for everybody, and of course the online auctions are a possibility. If you do go that route, you need to have your application in way sooner than the actual event happens, because Government is usually slow, and they're often slow to approve things. They might,
Yeah.
in some cases, have to actually come to your facility to look at things. Pretty rarely when you're doing the internet option, but for some people it might. So just plan way in advance of when you actually want to bring a horse home for that process, because it takes a while. And you're going to spend more on the online auction. If you're a first-time Mustang owner, and you don't want to necessarily start the process, there's also a lot of different functions that are available around the country. And again, there I'd recommend going in person and watching it first and talking to people who have gotten horses from that event. Because one of the other danger things that will happen to people when they're first getting into Mustangs is they try and do everything right. They get a trainer in mind, they get a horse from a trainer, and then what the horse they end up with is actually not the horse that they were promised, because either they weren't sure actually it was going to be given to them, or the training in question wasn't what it was advertised as. It happens a lot. So really thoroughly doing your research before you go. It will save you a lot of heartache in the long run, and so on and so forth. So yeah, those are my touch home points. But yeah, I really vastly prefer in person towards getting anything from online. I think it's just a much better way to do it. But some people have had success the other way.
Yeah.
So
I think adding to that is like, be prepared for uncertainty. If you're doing the online adoption, you might think you have a horse, you might lose it, you might get your application in, you might not, and then you might think you went and, like Sam said, saw this horse in person, met the trainer, and you bring it home and it's a different horse than what you expected. That doesn't mean that it's wrong for you. I've talked to a lot of people who it's almost like their Mustang found them because it gave them some things that they needed to learn, some things they need to do. That was certainly true for me. My vision of owning a Mustang is not at all how it has played out, but in my opinion, it's been a lot better. But I think, we can feel really insecure and scared of the uncertainty, or we can really embrace it. Like, maybe this is different than I imagined it, but maybe it's going to be better. But if you get a Mustang, it's probably not going to follow your vision. So just be okay with that uncertainty. If something comes up and it's different than you thought, like, that's okay. Reach out to new people, reach out to someone for support. I think any of us, if someone messaged us about a Mustang, we would be more than happy to help, send you to resources, like do anything to support a successful adoption. And I know that we're not the only ones out there, that there are lots of people who just love the Mustang, know how great they are. And so even if it comes that it's not exactly what you expected, or you're disappointed you didn't get the horse, like, that doesn't mean it's not meant for you, and that it's not going to be an incredible experience if you are committed to it and stick with it and dedicated to it.
Our auction for the Aniki horses was, there was a lot of attention around it because the herd is so well known. There was, the internet, it was an internet auction. It was a week-long process. When you bid on a horse, you don't actually have to buy the horse if you're the winning bidder. There's just a lot of gaming of the system that happens. It's really a scary place. And so the whole auction process was unnecessarily dramatic. I remember seeing Stargazer
It's true.
And it was my images that someone had stolen from me, and was like advertising him on all these Mustang hubs to increase and inflate pricing on him because they thought he was going to go to a sanctuary. But meanwhile, I was trying to adopt him. And the fact that I was able to keep them together is just honestly a miracle. But that it's a kind of an ugly place on that online auction, in my opinion. I think for me as a first time Mustang owner, and I shouldn't say owner, I like to think of myself more of a guardian, but I probably would not dive head first and do it how I did it. I would find a trainer a gentler that I really trusted and admired, and was really behind on their processes, and I would buy directly from them, like a horse that for like Sam Van Fleet was like gentling. I would go directly to her, and I would get a trained horse. I would not do what I did, actually. I adopted them together because I knew them in the wild and I loved them in the wild and wanted to keep them together. But it was a hard. I'm glad that I did it, but it's a hard road, and I'm not a professional at it, and I've had it. I've used worked with trainers still to this day to get me where I am, and I'm fortunate for that. But I also know that that's not feasible for everybody. So the auction process can be a really scary place. But I agree with Sam that go in person and know them and see them, and just don't buy them because they look pretty or they're tall. That's not necessarily you're not setting yourself or them up for success sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and it's so hard to see them really on the online auction, like you're lucky if you get a good picture or a video that gives you an idea of them in general, because they're usually just, at least what I've seen, they're just frantically running around. So
Yeah,
it's hard to tell. Yeah, it's hard to really tell like what you're actually getting.
Yeah. And I mean, if it's a mare, it's very likely she's pregnant. I mean, Nora was pregnant whenever I adopted her. I suspected as much. And, she ended up losing the baby, but, the mares are most likely pregnant. So, it's just, it can be, it's hard to know. I mean, Sam and I are fortunate that we knew our horses in the wild and knew their families and knew their behaviors. And we really took a very educated guess to know that Stargazer, for example, was going to be completely different than Nora because he was a bachelor most of his life. He was okay with being by himself. He liked being by himself. He, was confident in these areas, but was unconfident in the other areas. So I had a lot of information walking into this with them. I will say, though, that's worked against me as well because knowing them in the wild, like I have pictures of Stargazer brutally like fighting with another horse. And like that horse is not the horse that's in my pasture. Like he's not, but in my mind, like, I'm like, I have a picture of him bloodied with scars all over him. And he's the puppy, like he's a puppy at this point, but that's not who he is at this point. And so I know that for me, I've found that I can be I second guess myself, or I get a little bit nervous, or I count them out thinking, oh, they're going to be not okay with this because, I knew them in the wild and this is how they looked and they were a wild Mustang. But really, they're, like, for example, Nora's like, oh, like, you want me to do this for the first time? Okay, cool. Like, I'll do it. And I think she's not. And so it can be good and bad knowing them in the wild, but,
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. That's cool. And that's cool to hear about like how he was in the wild versus now how he is with you. More of a puppy dog. I love that.
He's different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. One of the things that I'm finding interesting, and I've just kind of in the last week really started to dive in. So the marathon that I'm doing is the whole pull is to bring people to see the wild horses, right? And it's Run with the Horses, and it's the White Mountain HMA. And they just last August, days before this marathon, they did a huge roundup. And so I actually messaged the marathon. I'm still waiting to hear back, but I'm like, are there even any wild horses there right now for this marathon that you're pushing for to see the wild horses? Like, I don't know, because they rounded up, I think, 586, somewhere around there, 589, give or take, and none have been returned, at least according to updated stats and sites. I just, yeah, it's such a layered issue, and I think it's interesting all the different avenues and ways that, I mean, most things come down to the dollar, right? Everything comes down to the dollar in the society we're living in. And so I think it's interesting when you start peeling back all the layers and then you're like, oh, okay, I see this and I see this and I see this. And of course we could go on for hours and hours on auctions and all of those topics. But yeah, it's been quite a interesting road. I have piles of notebooks on my table and my family. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, don't touch any of this stuff. This is all my Mustang stuff. Leave it alone. Yeah.
Well, the awareness. Oh, I was just gonna say, like, the awareness comes with a bit of a double-edged sword too. So we were always so excited to have everyone know all about the Aniki horses and come visit them, and they're right along the Pony Express. But the flip side of that, and I know some of the other herds, like Corolla out in which is in North Carolina, people get too close. They take the wildness out of the horses. They don't run. When they see you, they're not as afraid. People try to feed them. So there's a trade-off there too.
Sure. Yep. And that makes a lot of sense. I used to really enjoy a lot of events like rodeos and things like that. And so, until I started working at our sanctuary and helping out with their social media. And I'm just like, well, I look at now all these horses and I think like, where are you going after this? And so opening your eyes and having awareness can definitely change some things for you. Not that it's a bad thing. It's just then you're like, oh, sometimes I kind of liked it when my eyes were closed. Well, I mean, I love I really love learning. Obviously, I love research and diving into things. So if we were to start a book club, what book would you recommend that I read?
I mean, I think for the wild horse issue, I think the Wild Horse Country is by David Phillips. I think that is a required reading for Mustang owners. Because it talks about the issue, talks about the history of it. It won a Pulitzer Prize. He writes for the New York Times, and I think that's a pretty interesting book that talks about the wild horse and burro issue. So that's a top read for me, I think.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on whether we want more surrounded around the issue or whether we want more like wild horse behavior specific
Anything,
books.
whatever comes to mind.
This one is apparently really good. I haven't read it myself, but it has come recommended to me by a few friends and family who are all fairly science minded and are like really into like balanced talk on the issue. So this one's one to check out. Like I said, I haven't read it yet, but have had it recommended to me.
So that's Wild Horses of the West for people who are just listening.
For general horse behavior, this one's really good. It's by Lucy Rees, and it's Horses and Company. It's a really good sort of, it moves away from the concepts of like alpha mare and alpha stallion and like dominance that typically have dominated the horse world. And it's a pretty good look at a way of reframing how we see horses in the wild. She's pretty good. She's seen a bunch of horses all across the world in wild settings, and so she's got a great basis to start from. Not everything's perfect. They are not in every book. But that's a really good one for all horse owners to look at. And then this is if you're a nerd. So it's by George H. Waring. It's Horse Behavior. This one's the second edition. There may be some more recent ones. It's a little out of date. It was first published in 1983, but it's like just a big fat overview of horse behavior, and it goes into wild behaviors and more domestic behaviors and how they differ. And it's really good. It's got a lot of scientific articles that are referenced in it. And so if you're really nerdy and you really want the deep dive and you're willing to do more research on top of it, that's a great reference.
That's awesome. And I haven't read any of those, so I can add those to my stack of half-read books and get to them.
Yeah, a million more, but those are the three that I'm going to present.
Those are the top three?
Yeah, those are the top three for at this moment. Yeah,
I love hearing those.
That's awesome. I love that. I had another question that just kind of came to me. So, we use social media so much, and it's fantastic, but I think sometimes for awareness, for raising funds, for rescues, for whatever your organization is, it can limit your kind of thinking as to how to get the word out. What are some things that you do maybe to touch in your community or to touch that aren't just social media driven? Because I feel like people hit a block and they're like, well, I didn't get likes and I didn't get donations this way. What else can I do? But we did fundraise and do things like that before social media.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can speak for me, I'm known in my neighborhood as Mustang Melissa, which is hilarious.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but, so Nora is, we're training in for dressage, and we're learning to jump. And so we are a part of like a hunt and saddle club. There's no hunting or nothing of the sort. But, I'm totally not for that, by the way. But, so she's showing up with these big fancy warm bloods and these big fancy off the track thoroughbreds and, these big horses. And here's little Nora coming in, my little Mustang mare. And she's doing intro test B or intro test A, at this horse. Yeah, so I mean, we're representing and we're just saying, hey, like Mustangs can do these things too. And, I'm not trying to do more. I'm just trying to have we just have some goals that we're trying to meet. And if we get them, that's great. But that's what we're doing. And I know for me, we've raised a lot of awareness about Mustangs, especially on the East Coast. I don't think people know a lot about the issues in the West, or if they think of Mustangs, they think of the Outer Banks horses, which are awesome, by the way, but they have a little bit different of issue. It's not as contentious with those horses, but I think just representing personally.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, so I tend to be more on the behavior science side of things. So I don't know how many people this will apply to, but I do a lot of going to like a community college to talk, or going to a training center to talk. And so it's not quite like a clinic setup, although you could do that. But it's more kind of like having a direct outreach where it's like, I have this knowledge. Are you guys interested in having me come share this knowledge with you? And I guess in that similar token, it really is about identifying your skill set and your strength, like, what kind of thing has you be passionate? What kind of thing do you want to share? And then identifying something near you that fits with that role. So if, like, for Melissa, she is passionate about, getting Nora riding and going out and showing what Mustangs can do. So entering in a local show is perfect, right? And then she can reach out and talk to people in that process. For me, since I tend to do more of, horse behavior type stuff, going to talks is great. For somebody else, maybe they like Breyer horses and maybe they want to paint Breyer horses. And so maybe they can paint a specific Mustang and go talk about that Mustang at an event. And so there's just a huge swath of things that could fit that. But I think, identifying what you're passionate about and what you are skilled in to share, and then finding things near you that fit that avenue and going to share that.
And my son's girlfriend just painted me some horses, my horses, and I convinced her to paint one of the horses that I'm supporting from Rescue Ranchito, and we're going to use it for a fundraiser. So that's right on point. I was like, oh, if you could do one of these, we could totally do a fun fundraiser with this cute horse. And she's so good at it. They're really cool.
That's so
awesome.
fun. I want you to know that in my dreamscape of things I want to have in my universe, like, I want Stargazer and Nora to be Breyer horses. I want them to be a couple. And so I'm putting that into the universe to have that happen. But that is like my top dream, to have that happen. Them be
seems like a doable dream. I feel like that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah, we're putting it out there again. I was going to say the same thing. Melissa wants Breyer horses. Yeah. Like, we are going to make this happen somehow. Get Breyer.
Come on, Breyer. Come through for us. But
that's so fun. I think
too, though, just whenever we use our own providers, and maybe from a behavioral perspective, like, maybe Sam can chime in on this, but even when we're working with, like, my local farrier, my vet, my chiropractor, like, what I found is they say, oh my God, you have a Mustang, and they get a little nervous, but then showing them, like, hey, there's a different way, and my horses aren't scary, and they're cool, and they're just inexperienced, and I think that is also being in touch with our community too. So I know Sam has had some great relationships with her network too through that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. Just interfacing with your veterinarians and farriers, etc., is really big, because a lot of people they have that sort of knee-jerk reaction that, oh, Mustangs are a problem. And so even if you have a Mustang that's a little more difficult, just talking with them and talking them through the process. I lot of, I think, fear of Mustangs comes from not understanding them. So as an example, for whatever reason, my particular Mustang has issues about his face, right? And most people, when they first greet a horse, they reach their hand out towards their face to touch their face, right? We do this automatically. And so the first time that I had a specific farrier out, I had forgotten to mention that. And she reached out, of course, to touch the horse's face, and we had an event. But it ended up okay. But that's the thing that gets a lot of veterinarians and farriers off guard. So if you think about, okay, how is this going to be different for them? How can I prepare my vet and my farrier to approach my horse the best way? How can I set them up for success? Then it becomes so much less scary for them. And then they can go, oh, Mustangs are actually great. We're just not quite approaching it the right way. And that sets them up for success later down the line. And then they might mention your name to somebody else. They'd be like, oh, you've got a Mustang? I've got a client who has a Mustang, and this is kind of the things they've been doing. Maybe you should reach out. So yeah, networking is awesome.
So communication's important. Wow, we've heard that before. And and networking and getting out there and being seen. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I know my vet is, and through my farrier, I think I know every Mustang, like the tri-state area at this point. So they're like, oh, you need to know this person. And it's like, we're in this little cute Mustang club, which I love. But it's cool whenever you get to see, like, Mustangs just show how different they can be. Like, for example, mine are fine being separated and by themselves. And so, because I don't know, they're okay with that. They're not like Ruben, my domestic. He like loses his mind if someone leaves him in the stall. And Sam, huge plug for Sam and her skills here and her behavioral, the things that she does to help with this significantly helped me with Ruben's separation anxiety. And he's a 20-some-year-old domestic horse. I thought this would never change. And I've done some behavioral things that have modified just a few modifications, and it has significantly helped him. But, the Mustangs have no issues. And my vet is always like, so surprised. She's like, you don't need to leave someone in here while they're waiting to get their feet done. I'm like, for me to check them, like, no. Like they're totally cool by themselves. They know that the horse is right outside. They'll be okay. But Ruben, on the other hand, prior to some of Sam's like suggestions, would have literally run me over to get out to go see the other horses. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
So plug for Sam.
Yeah.
Yay, Sam. I know, I was thinking of some horses that I'll ask Sam some questions about later. That's awesome. I did want to share that just through this process, I've kind of connected with, I mentioned them once before, Rescue Ranchito and At Ease Horsemanship. And what I really like about both of them is they're very passionate about what they do. They're very passionate about the horses, but they also are trying to work on a very doable scale. Because like you said, there's so many people that can take on so much at once, then get in over their head. And even if you're not even worried about feeding, who's going to be the manpower that's going to feed them? Like those kinds of questions. And they're both so focused on really doing it the right way for the horse, for the individual. And so I'm trying to just really kind of plug them and raise funds and awareness for them to help them on this process. Because how cool would it be if we could continue to create this network where, yes, we get one solid, really good adopter that is ready to go and takes in a horse, and then we get a program like At Ease that can take in a couple of the rescues that have been brought in, and now they can take them and give them a forever home. Because it's not just rescuing them from wherever they're coming from, right, and adopting them wherever. We need that longevity to last. Bring these people together so that then the rescue knows, okay, I can take on a couple because I have these people that are ready to take one on. So yeah, I think
that's so huge.
Cool possibility.
Yeah. And you talked about like, what can someone do if they can't necessarily own a Mustang? And I think, Hollie, you're such a perfect example of stuff you can do. And it can be really simple as like sharing a Facebook post about a Mustang. Right. And that might get to someone who's never even heard or doesn't know that wild horses exist or anything about them. So I think you're a great example because you are out there just supporting and advocating and championing people who are helping the Mustangs. And that's not nothing at all. That's a huge support and a help to everybody that wants what's best for the Mustangs.
Well, it's fun for me, luckily. Like, I'm horse obsessed. So
yeah. I mean, we're glad to have you on board the Mustang crew. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll chat again in a couple years and see what my Mustang looks like, right?
That's right. Yeah. I'm always excited when someone I've talked to doesn't have a Mustang. I'm like, when are they coming?
Don't tell my husband.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great folks that don't have horses that support, like Roam the Range. They do a lot of work in dedicating. Yeah, I'm wearing her bracelets right now.
Oh, yay! Roam the Range.
Yeah, so we love them. So we love them, but supporting, like you said, on social media, but supporting trainers that are, maybe you can't own a Mustang, but you could support a good Mustang gentler so that they can go and gentle more horses to then get them out there.
That's right.
That's always something that's really helpful. I mean, because sanctuaries, there's a finite amount of space, and sadly, there's just not enough space, and there's capacity issues. A good Mustang gentler is the best insurance policy for a Mustang, for them to try to help to keep them out of a kill pen, because trained Mustangs tend to not end up there as often as untrained Mustangs.
Yeah, sure. It really creates value for the horse because it's no longer a $125 horse. It's a horse that people can interact with, they can utilize for whatever things they're interested in. So yeah, that's a great point to make.
Yeah, and I'm so cautious about saying that because not all trainers are created equal. And as a general rule, those compressed time frames of 90 days is just, in my opinion, that's not enough time. I'm not saying it's impossible, but in general, there's, I know what I was able to accomplish in 90 days, and it is not what sometimes you see online. And, so finding someone that is aligned with your values and treats the horse as not like a tool or a means to an end, but an actual partner, that is really, really valuable. And that time frame can be a little bit slower. So supporting that, I'm a big fan of Sweetbow horses. They are trained Mustangs out in California, and they have a longer time frame, but their horses are fantastic, and they are truly were able to, you know exactly what you're getting, and they're very comfortable and relaxed, and nothing was forced, which I'm a big supporter of.
Yeah, I want to back up that recommendation. I've actually been there in person to Sweetbo back in 2019 when we had the whole craziness. They invited me down to see what they were up to see if it was going to be a good place to possibly, put some Anarchy at. Then they've continued, like when I first visited, it was already excellent, and they've continued to just grow and get better and better. And so, really incredible facility that actually truly stands by what they say when they say they take the time it takes for each horse.
Yeah, and that's such a good phrase to keep in mind with Mustangs. Like, it takes the time it takes, and if you want a good horse, you have to be able to set aside your timeline and instead focus on your ultimate end goal.
Absolutely. Which is where, by the way, where I met Sam Van Fleet. That was one of their trainers. So yeah. But I am really Erin out in Utah. She's I'm following. I'm very interested in her. I love what she's doing. So I'm really very curious to just see her grow. And from I haven't personally met her, but I love everything I'm seeing about her so far.
Yeah, she's great. We did a fun Valentine's fundraiser for her, and I sent out some Mustang Express postcards that had one of her Mustangs on it, and that was super fun. And yeah, she's cool and cool family, and
yeah.
I think she's going to do some great things. Really big heart.
Does anyone want anything else to add? And before we kind of wrap up,
I don't know. Stargazer and Nora, my favorite Mustangs in the whole.
Yeah. Follow them. They're super fun to watch.
They are so
Yeah, and I guess on that note, yeah, if you guys can just, maybe each of you can go around, like, where can people find you? What can they do to support your work? How can they take advantage of what you're doing? Give a quick rundown of that. And then, of course, I'll include it all in, like, the notes. So if people want to go to your websites or social media, it's easy to find. So Melissa, and then we'll go.
All right. Well, Stargazer and Nora, we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, we are on TikTok. So you can find us anywhere. You can follow along on our journey. I try to make it as real as possible so you can see a little bit behind the scenes of what it looks like to have Mustangs, and at least my two Mustangs, and what having them in the domestic life looks like. And I would say that just trying to, we're not a nonprofit. We're not looking for, we're not asking for money. We're not in that case. But if you want to help Mustangs, I would say checking out the Anarchy Catalog Foundation, which that is a nonprofit that documents and, as a community resource for people out in Utah and about the horses in Utah, I should say. And that's the herd that Stargazer and Nora from. And so I would say that's a great resource. Then I would say, the Wild Beauty Foundation, they're trying to do good work about raising awareness about wild horses. And I'm a big fan of, the Western Watersheds, Anarchy Catalog Foundation. So, I mean, that's a little nonprofit that I'm on the board of, in all fairness, full disclosure, but it's an information resource to the, and it's community sourced, which is something that I love, that kind of just informs others about what's happening with the Anarchy horses. I don't know, Sam?
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the beginning, my primary thing that I do is sort of equine behavior type consultations. So my business name is Equine ABCs. So the word equine and then ABC and then with an S at the end. And I'm on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook. I'm also looking into doing a YouTube. This is very kind of like dust in the sky still. But we mentioned people sending in videos to help interpret. So one of the things I would like to start doing is taking sort of mainstream videos that people often share widely, and they go, "What's going on here?" And
that
actually
would be
looking
awesome.
at it from a science standpoint. So I guess if you want to follow me on YouTube, and hopefully at some point in the near future, I'll have start to put some stuff like that up.
You should do that.
Yeah, that sounds really fun.
Yeah. But then from a business's perspective, if people are having trouble with a Mustang or even a domestic horse, and they want some guidance, either just in the form of a lesson, or I do full behavioral consultations where I look at your setup and all the different little things that you can change for things like separation anxiety or aggression, horse-horse aggression, horse-people aggression, that kind of thing. If you go to my website, you can look at those different services and book those if you want. And then also I've got courses. So if people want to learn more about wild horse behavior and how it applies to our domestic horses, I basically work with a group of colleagues who also do behavior type things. There's vets and neuroscientists, etc. And they all kind of coalesce together in this place called Understand Horses, which is a website, understandhorses.com. And there's tons of courses available there on a very wide breadth of horse topics. And I specifically talk about wild behaviors. And so you can take a look there and look at their courses and get some more general information about horses or specifically about wild horse behaviors if you're interested more in that.
Awesome. And how about you, Hollie? How can people support, follow, see what you're up to?
Follow me on Instagram, just Hollie Tenberge, and it's HOLLIE, no Y, and then TENBERGE. And I post mostly horses, my work horses, the sanctuary horses. There's actually a blind Mustang that's out at the sanctuary that I work with, and we're currently kind of trying to read her brand to see if we can find out a little bit more about her. She's been there since 2012, I believe, but she's so fun. Her name's Wishes, and she's super cute. So I post about her as well. But you can follow me on there. And then I am in the process. I'm almost finished with it. I'm making a website specifically for the marathon and the Mustangs, and links to people on social media. And Melissa sent a lot of really good resources, so I added some of those, and that way we can kind of streamline it, so I don't have to explain this every single time from start to finish of what's going on. So when that's done, I'll share that on my Instagram as well.
Oh, yay. That's exciting. Yeah. I should say too that, not yet, but very shortly, I'm going to have, Stargazer's paintings. We're going to have them on Etsy. So we're going to
fun.
That's so cool.
Yeah. We have a few down, and we're, friends and family so far. We're refining our craft, but that's been pretty fun.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys all for being here. This was so good. It's so great to see people come together as part of the Mustang community. I know it can be really intimidating. I was definitely intimidated, and there are definitely some people that kind of scared me when I first got in the Mustang community, but I think this is just such a testament to there's so many good people in the Mustang community ready to reach out and to help. Sam, I think the work you do is awesome to be able to help people understand their horses better. And, to be able to just go in and make some small changes that can really improve your horse's life. I think every horse owner would want that. So I hope people really do take advantage of you. And of course, Stargazer and Nora's story is just so fun to watch. When I saw Stargazer painting, I'm like, oh, that's so fun. It's just, there's so many possibilities. And I love that you share about them and help spread the word of Mustangs, because I really think that they are super incredible. And I can't wait to see your Mustang, Hollie, when you get to that point. So yeah. We might have to have you back on to talk about it. But
I said I was going to get a horse again as an adult by the time I turned 40. I turned 40 this June, and I have 2.
So you're ahead of the timeline. That's okay. Yeah.
We weren't even supposed to have 1. Now we have 2.
Yeah, that's okay. I do the same thing. They keep coming. I'm like, oops. But in whatever capacity you are in with the Mustangs, it's awesome to have you on board. They're really amazing horses and really incredible. And I think this is just a great resource that people can know. There's people out there to help you be successful, and it will totally be worth the journey and such a good experience if you get in the Mustang world in any capacity, whether that's as a supporter, a photographer, an advocate, whatever you do, they're cool. And it's a great community. So
yeah. And I can speak from my personal experience is that I haven't met anyone yet that has been like, no, I don't want to talk to you about Mustangs. Everybody's so
that's good.
Open and yeah, and I'm just learning so much and feel very unjudged by the community so far, which is great.
Yeah, it's awesome. And there are definitely people out there who have no judgment, especially I think the people who have been through the process understand it can be so varied. Yeah. There's so many variables, and if you can just embrace it as a really fun learning process and you're committed to it, I have no doubt you'll be successful. Anybody who wants to get involved in the Mustang world and even adopt ones.
Thank you for joining us and learning about horses that heal and the humans who help them. We hope you'll continue with us on this journey. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite platform and follow The Touch of a Mustang on any of the major social media outlets. Please share with your friends, anyone who loves horses, or anyone who might be struggling and could benefit from this message. If you have felt the healing power of horses or help them in their divinely appointed mission, please reach out. We want to hear your story. As we say goodbye, always remember that the horse is always there to help you heal.